Welcome back to Court TV Live. The state of Florida is wrapping up its case in chief against Danielle Redlick. The second to last witness for the state's case in chief is on the stand. She is the assistant medical examiner for Orange County, Florida. Let's go in live.
In this particular case, can you tell the jury who you actually performed the autopsy on?
The name is Michael Redlich. Yes.
So let's talk to and tell the jury about the injuries that you found when doing your external examination. So could you overall describe the injuries that you located on Michael's body?
Sure. So just starting up at the head, on the face, there was a incised wound, so something that's made with a sharp instrument. And then on the inside of the upper lip, it's not, this is just a drawing, so it's not showing, but it's on the inside of the upper lip, there was an abraded contusion. So a very small bruise with a little bit of an abrasion. So you kind of get like a scrape. Moving down onto the torso, there were some faint contusions or bruises on the chest, on the left side of the chest. And then also on the left side of the chest, kind of near where the armpit area is, was a stab wound, just right there. And then on the left arm, there were more contusions or bruises. And then also another area of contusion down on the wrist. And on the right arm, another small contusion. And then on the right, or I'm sorry, on the left side of the body, on the torso, right there, there was a superficial incised wound. And when I say superficial, I mean kind of like a scrape or a scratch. So it's a linear wound, it's very shallow, it looks like a scratch.
Well, now let's talk about each one of these with a little bit more depth. And you're under permission to publish what's been entered as state 60.
Yes, ma'am.
My computer is loading up here so we can look at some of these pictures. Before you actually begin your external examination, do you or did you collect any samples in order to be sent away for any further analysis for FDLE, like swabs or fingernails?
Yes, so we did, we do a few standard things on cases that are either suspicious or being worked up as a homicide. So on this particular case, I did swabs of the hands and wrists, and that's for biologic material for potential testing. We also did fingernail scrapings and fingernail clippings, and then we also use pulled head hair. So those are the standard things that we collect for law enforcement agencies.
And could you please describe to the jury how you collected and how you did the swabs from Michael's hands?
So when we're doing swabs, that would be the top priority of all of those things that I just listed. And so I do the collection. I wear sterile gloves. We use sterile cotton-tipped swabs. And I have an assistant that will help me. So I have the swabs. They'll put a few drops of sterile saline water on the swabs to kind of moisten it up. And I do one hand at a time. My standard procedure is to start by the thumb and the base of the thumb and the index finger. And then I work my way across the top of the hand over the knuckles. And then I go to the palm of the hand and get as much of that surface area as I can. And then also I come onto the wrist. And once I have that collection done, it will be placed into, on its own, into a rectangular box that's sealed. So I do that for each of those hands. And then once I'm done with that, then I have autopsy technicians that work with me, and they do the collection of the fingernail scrapings and the fingernail clippings and the head hair.
And so just to be clear, on Michael's hands, when you did the swabs, you just didn't swab where you saw blood, right?
Yeah, right. I try to get all surfaces of the hands.
Okay. So could you describe to the jury what we're looking at in photo 087?
So this is an identification photo, and we do this initially when we open the shroud or the bag, and that's to document exactly what we see when we first open the bag, because the bag has been sealed prior to coming to the office. And so it's to document exactly what we're seeing when we first open the bag. And the placard that you see, that white, that's our internal designation. So you'll see the top where it says the case number 19, that's for the year 2019. And then where it says 00059, our cases are numbered sequentially. So that's just designating that as case number 59 for that year. And then if we know the decedent's name, then that will be put on the placard as well.
And then the date, is that the date that you did the autopsy?
Correct.
Okay, so not the date that you received the body, is that correct?
Correct. Although it can be both depending on the case.
Okay, so let's look at photo 106 first. So could you describe what is this injury, and could you describe what that was to the jury?
Sure, so you're looking at the left side of the face, and we're looking really at near the eyebrow area and upper eyelid. And that's a superficial incised wound, so something that was made with a sharp object.
Okay, so this wound right here by the eye was made by a sharp object, is that correct?
Yes.
And would a wound like this, would that have the possibility of causing a scar?
For most people it would. Everyone heals a little bit differently, but whenever there's a break in the skin, most likely there will be a scar.
Now, right below it, is that another injury in which you found?
What do you mean by below?
Right here, sorry, where my cursor is.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of faint contusion there.
And a contusion for the jury is what?
Contusion being like a bruise.
And then could you describe to the jury what we're looking at in photo 107?
So at that superficial incised wound is just a closer image with a scale in place.
Now looking at photo 109, could you describe, because I believe that there's a few injuries on this photo. Let's first do this injury right here. Could you just describe to the jury what that is?
Sure. So you're looking at the left side of the body. It's the front of the body, and it's near the armpit, so chest armpit area. And that's a stab wound that you're seeing right there.
This stab wound, was this the only stab wound that you found?
It was the only stab wound, but there were other incised wounds.
And the stab wound, could you tell a jury, because it was a stab wound, could you determine what it was caused by?
Some sort of instrument or implement with a sharp edge.
And with a wound like this, would that cause a scar or something permanent on the body?
Most likely.
Now, at the end of the day, and I know we're jumping ahead just a little bit, based on the your overall review and autopsy, is this going to be the primary wound in this case?
As far as the most lethal injury, yes.
Now, looking right here, can you tell the jury what we're seeing right here?
Yeah, it's a little bit faint, but there are scattered contusions or bruises on the left chest.
All right, the assistant medical examiner on the stand detailing to the jury the injuries sustained to Michael Redlich, the victim in this case. Let's quickly bring in Dave Ehrenberg and Lauren Stuckert. Dave, this is not a whodunit. This is not a case because we do expect the defendants to take the stand and say, yes, I stabbed him in self-defense. But this type of testimony, it is jarring. These are the photos. We don't show them. We can't show them. This court order doesn't allow us to show them. We wouldn't anyway because they are gruesome. And it brings it home, does it not, to the jury? Somebody's dead here.
Sure does, Ted. And you have to imagine the jury is pretty shocked and horrified what they're watching. This is a real human being, someone who was described as a loving father. And that's why they put the daughter on first. You want to humanize this victim. It's not just some anonymous individual. This is a loving, caring father who meant the world to this daughter. And now look at him. Look at what happened. Plus, it destroys all of her alibis. Number one, that he had a heart attack. I mean, come on. Obviously, all the stab wounds belie that. Number two, he was stabbing himself. Really near the eye? You saw that testimony that he got stabbed at least once near the eye. That's not where you stab yourself. You're going to stab yourself. And number three, this was self-defense. Well, look at her wounds, superficial wounds on her wrist that were self-inflicted, and that's it. Meanwhile, he's been stabbed all over the place in a bloody mess. I mean, this destroys her case, and it's just another nail in her proverbial coffin.
Lauren, to that point, the stab wound to the shoulder, the most lethal injury, we just heard the witness talk about that. It's the other ones, though, that show an extended struggle. And that, again, needs to be accounted for when and if Danielle Redlich takes the stand.
There needs to be a greater explanation as to the extent of this struggle and what it entailed. However, I noticed that the medical examiner, when she was first explaining it, she stated that it was a stab wound to the left chest, which is pretty close to the heart. As her testimony continued, it appears to be more towards the armpit and shoulder area. So that could actually play favorably for the defense. This is one stab wound, not multiple. She's not going on multiple, shoving this knife into her husband multiple times. I think that would almost be favorable. And if she was aiming more towards an area that would actually avoid the heart, I think that could lend favorably to the defense, potentially.
Yeah, and could back up one of the versions of her story that she stabbed him and ran and hid in the bathroom. That's why the 11-hour gap in time. We'll wait and see. We'll get a break in here and more testimony coming up from the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on the victim, Michael Redlich. That's next. Stay with us.
I'm Julia Janae in Orlando, Florida for the kitchen knife murder case, and this is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Back to the courtroom we go. The assistant medical examiner is detailing to the jury the autopsy that she performed on the victim in this case, Michael Redlich.
When the knife penetrates the lung, what type of an issue would an individual have when that occurs?
Well, this particular wound, even though it did pierce the lung, it didn't pierce any of the major blood vessels of the lung. There would still be bleeding from that area, but it's not like the main trunk. So there would be an issue as far as the functioning of the lung. And more importantly than that is just the fact that something penetrated into the chest cavity. And so anytime there's a breach in the chest cavity, that causes problems with the actual mechanics of breathing, so the rib cage moving the way it should to help us breathe. So when there's a penetrating injury into the chest, that gets interrupted.
So an individual would have issues breathing because of the slice into the lung?
More breaching of the chest cavity. The pressure between our chest cavity and the atmosphere is different. And so that's one of the issues that can happen with the penetrating injury. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there was a collection of blood. So as the chest cavity begins to fill with blood, then it becomes harder for that lung to expand in breathing. So that also is causing an issue.
And taking the blood issue aside, with just the lung injury in and of itself, would an individual need some type of a surgery in order to, fix the lung?
It depends on which structures, and this is in cases where I've seen similar injuries, there has been surgical repair, but it depends on the case, and I'm not a trauma surgeon, so I can't say for every case, but.
So now, moving on, let's talk about the major injury. You said that a vein was cut in this particular case. Is that correct?
Yes.
And because the vein was cut, there was blood loss, you indicated, right?
Yes.
So could you indicate, at any point in time in your internal examination, was there any blood collection in the body that you could measure?
Yeah, in the left chest cavity.
And were you able to measure how much blood, was lost and was collecting in the left chest cavity?
So in the chest cavity, I retrieved about 750 milliliters, so, close to a liter. The other areas, so for example, like in the skeletal muscle and in the soft tissue, I can't collect that, so I can't assign a number to that. All I can do is the blood that I can retrieve from cavities.
Okay.
And the same with external hemorrhage, so any blood on the scene, I can't quantify that.
And based on your examination as a whole, did you come to a conclusion of whether or not Mr. Redlich died of a heart attack?
He had heart disease, but there was no evidence of a heart attack or, clogging of the vessels. There was no evidence of that.
So he didn't die of a heart attack, right?
No.
So let's go back here to this blood loss for a moment. How would blood loss affect an individual?
It depends on how quickly it's lost. The more quickly the blood is lost, the more quickly you'll see symptoms. Typically, they'll feel cold. The vision may begin to dim. They'll become weak. And at some point in time, they'll become incapacitated, meaning, they may not be able to walk. They may not be able to communicate at all. And then from there, it would progress to, unconsciousness, and without treatment, it can progress to death.
And approximately how much blood does an individual have in their body?
In general, we say about 5 liters. Now that's going to vary, of course. Bigger people are going to have a little bit more, and smaller people will have a little bit less, but around 5 liters is what we say generally.
And with an injury like this, and going to photo, because I know we chatted about it, so let's show the jury photo, the 131. Could you tell the jury what this is a photo of?
So that's the left lung, and the darker area, that's where the stab wound is.
Okay. So with an injury like this, where we have a stab wound, where the vein has been cut and an individual is losing blood, approximately how long would that individual be able to walk around before they lose consciousness?
Yeah, that's kind of hard to give a number, right? Because we can't really study this type of thing. So we have to use observational techniques. So, and everyone is different. Every scene is a little bit different. So that's pretty difficult to say.
Okay. Could you give an approximation because I know you can't give an exact, but because you indicated that at some point in time there'd be a loss of consciousness. So is there an average based on the studies as to when an individual, might start to lose consciousness?
Not particularly with an injury like this. In penetrating injuries involving the heart, there's a little bit more information, but for something like this where, it's one of the extremities, that's a little bit more difficult. In cases that I've had that have been with similar injuries, probably 15-ish to 20 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean that person is dead at that time. It just means that they may not be able to walk or communicate. They may be at that level.
Now, you indicated that they might not be dead. So after an individual, and let's go back. So before an individual loses consciousness, would they be, as they're losing blood, would they be having issues breathing?
Yes, most likely.
And what about speaking? At some point in time, are they going to have issues speaking?
Yes, so the progression usually goes from somebody who is able to communicate, able to speak, to maybe speaking, but not making any sense, saying nonsensical things, to making just noises and not forming any words or any sentences. That's the progression as it becomes more severe.
Now, you also mentioned that after an individual loses consciousness, that doesn't mean, so when they lose consciousness at this point in time, they're down on the ground, right?
Correct.
So they're not moving anymore.
Correct.
Now, you indicated that doesn't mean that they're necessarily dead. Could you expound on that? Does that mean that they could still be alive?
Yes.
So how long can an individual, after losing consciousness based on blood loss, still survive?
Again, that's really variable. The only data that we have are, again, when people have reported injuries involving the heart. And sometimes people can live up to a couple of hours. But again, those are just kind of case reports.
So in this particular case, and let me actually, before I do that, let me show you this last picture, which is 149. Are these the samples that you sent and collected with the fingernails and the swabs that were submitted to FDLE?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor.
All right, working out some technical issues. We're approaching the top of the hour. The defendant, granted, the medical examiner, who kind of looks like Dr. G, by the way, has a soothing voice, but she's putting the defendant asleep. She yawned a couple times there. Dave Ehrenberg, not a good look when your dead husband's body's being displayed on the screen and you're fidgeting and trying to stay awake.
No, I noticed those yawns. I mean, really, she doesn't have much jury appeal. I mean, her look, she looks upset, like, what am I doing here? She looks like she could commit a crime like this. And I think as far as the substance of the testimony, I thought it was really powerful in showing that this was a painful death for this victim. This wasn't the French Revolution and the guillotine. I mean, this was something that took time. He lost control of his motor skills, and then he died, and it was just awful. And also, her testimony says that these were not defensive wounds on him. So this was not like, I'm sorry, these were defensive moves. So it wasn't like he was the aggressor. These were defensive wounds, and this was a terrible way to die. So I think this is pretty powerful testimony by the medical examiner. The defendant should not be sleeping.
Yeah. All right, Dave Ehrenberg, thank you. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more live testimony from Orange County, Florida. We're expecting the defendant on the stand possibly today. Stay with us.
prettylitter.com.
Top of the hour. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ted Rollins. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday. Our cameras are bringing you live coverage of the kitchen knife murder trial out of Orlando, Florida. And the defendant, Danielle Redlich, could take the stand this afternoon. The state is wrapping up its case in chief, just two more witnesses. Redlich is charged with second-degree murder for the stabbing death of her husband, Michael, in 2019. She claims it was self-defense. The state is expected to rest its case in chief this morning, and then it is time for the defense. Will she be the defense's first witness? We'll have to wait and see. The jury is hearing this morning from the medical examiner. The state only plans to call one witness after this witness is finished, and they're on cross-examination. Let's get you in live to court.
Classic defensive wounds.
Classic meaning?
At what point, what would you consider the classic defensive wounds?
So, again, any of those areas that would be exposed when somebody is in a defensive position. So areas on the forearm are the most typical place. So this area of the forearm.
Did you at one time say that you did not see any classic defensive?
Objection, Your Honor, improper impeachment.
Let me have you all approach.
All right, sidebar. Judge wants everybody up at the bench. There's the defendant. She's had trouble today staying focused and staying alert. It's difficult in a courtroom day after day, and especially when you do have a soothing voice from the witness, which we're experiencing here with this assistant medical examiner. But it's important that the defendant obviously maintain a look, because jurors are looking at the defendant constantly. Lauren Stuckert, is that something you advise your clients to just be aware, because all eyes, in terms of the jury, are on you 24/7 when you're in that courtroom?
Absolutely. I mean, prior to any jury trial, I very clearly walk my client through the type of presence that they should opt to have while the trial is going on. They need to be respectful, not necessarily emotionally reactive if they hear something that they don't like, but certainly be aware that the eyes are on you. The jurors are looking at you in any fleeting moment. And unfortunately for Miss Redlich, she's not looking good for a lot of this testimony, which is very serious testimony.
Yeah, literally her husband's body displayed on the large screen for this jury as they go through the several injuries that he sustained, and his eventual death was bleeding to death, the 5 liters of blood. The story that's being told is one of suffering from the standpoint of the victim. How does that factor into a case like this, where at the end of the day, jurors are just trying to figure out who to blame and if the defendant is guilty or not?
Yeah, it's a problem for the defense, certainly, when you have this, long, excruciating death that had occurred, where potentially she could have, called 911 despite the confusion and trauma that she may have been going through. It begs the question whether the defense might forego this initial self-defense argument and perhaps go for the lesser included route, where they try and get the jury or ask the judge for an instruction indicating that they can find her guilty of the lesser offense of manslaughter, and that she didn't necessarily intend to kill him in the moment that she stabbed him, but it wasn't self-defense. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Her testimony is really going to dictate the decisions that the jury's going to be making.
There was apparently a deal on the table that she would serve 8 years with a guilty plea here. How do you deal with that if you're wanting your? I mean, that seems like a great deal. She's already done 3. How do you push a client to take a deal like that?
It's not the defense attorney's job to push a client in one direction or another when it comes to exercising their constitutional right to a trial. It needs to be solely the decision of the defendant. So my guess is that her attorney walked her through the risks associated with proceeding to trial, walked her through all defenses, but ultimately the decision has to be that of your clients. So my understanding is that she wanted to go to trial, and fortunately there is the lesser included route if she does not choose to testify.
Looks like the sidebar is broken up. The witness is being handed So materials and the questioning, the cross-examination will continue with the Assistant Medical Examiner of Orange County. Let's listen in.
And then I'm going to, when you're done look up, I'm going to give you another page and a to look up.
Okay.
And then now page 35. Six through 15. When you're done, please. At one point in this time during this case, did you at any point in time say that you did not see classic defensive wounds?
Yes.
Thank you. So the cause of death in this case was one stab wound, right?
Yes.
And it was in the upper left shoulder.
Yes.
You reviewed police reports in this case?
Not police reports.
Did you have an investigator on this case?
Yes.
All right. And you relied on your investigator, is that right?
Information from our investigator and from the detectives.
So your autopsy report was 11 pages long, is that right?
Yes.
You talk about the stab wound.
Yes.
You talked about the additional injuries.
Yes.
You talk about hypertensive cardiovascular disease of the deceased.
Yes.
You talk about obesity. Is that right?
Yes.
You gave a conclusion.
Yes.
You opine as to cause of death.
Yes.
You opine as to the manner of death.
Yes.
And you even include a diagram that we saw this morning.
Yes.
And you notated different contusions, superficial and size wounds, one stab wound on this diagram.
Yes.
You also had included in this autopsy report, you noticed whether or not there was tattoos on Michael Redlich.
Yes.
You also identified any clothing and valuables in this report.
Yes.
And nowhere in this report do you describe how long it takes or how Michael Redlich goes from alive to dead, do you?
That's stated in the cause of death and also my anatomic findings.
Okay. I get you have a cause of death. The cause of death is the stab wound, right?
Yes.
My question is, you don't describe in this autopsy report, which you describe other things, but you don't describe how Michael Redlich goes from alive all the way to dead. You don't say anything about time, do you?
That's not something that goes into an autopsy report. So we're reporting the findings that we have. And I think you're maybe asking about mechanisms. So we don't, a mechanism is not a finding. A mechanism is how that stab wound resulted in a death. So we don't discuss mechanism. We're presenting the findings that we have from the examination and the other information that we have.
So there's nothing about the mechanism, is my question.
Correct.
So you initially authored this autopsy report, the original one, January, was it 12th or 13th of 2019?
Well, so it doesn't happen at one point. So what happens after I do my examination, I dictate my report right afterwards. And then, I have to wait for any test to come back. So any toxicology or any other thing like that. Once all of those things come back, then I finalize the report. So I may edit the report, change things around, change wording, that type of thing.
Okay, so when did you finalize your initial report in this case?
This was in April.
Okay, well, didn't you author one? I'm not talking about the amended one. I'm talking about the original one that you did in this case, where you did not have the amendment. Do you know which one?
That date I don't remember because I only have.
So we're talking most likely in January of 2019, possibly early February of 2019. Is that correct?
I don't know the date.
Okay. We're taking a look at your autopsy report, the original one. Refresh your recollection.
Yes.
All right, as they get that report shown around the courtroom and then to the witness, we'll get a break in here. More live testimony when we return. Stay with us.
In-app and online.
Let's get you back into the courtroom. The assistant medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Michael Redlich is testifying. Cross-examination is wrapping up.
Stab wound. That was based on anecdotal evidence, right?
Just my observations.
And it's not based on anything scientific.
No, just observations.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Ms. Garcia.
Commissioner. Okay, doctor. So let's talk about these amendments that you made to your report. What were they?
I think initially on the final anatomic diagnosis, I had vein instead of, or I'm sorry, I had artery instead of vein. So I just corrected that. And I'm not sure of the other one. I think it might have been a grammar, but I do know that there was the one on the front page.
So did the amendment affect the cause and manner of death at all?
No.
So let's go to the defense talk to you about the defensive wounds and whether or not you saw classic defensive wounds. Could you describe to the jury about using your hands and how sometimes hands can be considered classic defensive wounds?
Particularly with sharp force injuries, the classic findings are we'll see cuts or not laceration, sorry, cuts or incised wounds of the hands, oftentimes between the thumb and index finger, near the bases of the finger. So that's classic for sharp force injuries.
And in this case, this is sharp force injuries, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so just to clarify, there were no injuries consistent with cuts to Michael's hands, right?
Correct.
However, the injury to the forearm, that's still consistent with the defensive wound, right?
It could be consistent with a defensive wound.
It's just not necessarily a sharp defensive wound, like a sharp injury defensive wound, right?
Yes.
So now let's go to the last thing that I just wanted to chat on briefly. Okay. So this incised wound to the head. You keep saying a scratch. Is it a scratch because it's not deep?
Yeah, it's just a way to, it's superficial. So when we think of scratch, scratch doesn't really go really deep down into the deeper tissue. So it's in the more superficial layers.
Okay, but I just want to clarify, that wound was caused by a sharp object, is that correct?
Yes.
So something consistent with a knife?
Anything with a sharp edge.
So could a fingernail have caused that?
No, fingernail wounds look a little bit different. There's usually, they're crescent shaped. Sometimes there can be a little bit of loss of tissue, whereas a wound that's made with a sharp object has very clean margins. And one of the things that we can do is, open the wound and look into it. It has some different characteristics than, say, from like blunt force trauma. So these are very well-defined, crisp edges, clean through not only the skin, but even the superficial layers underneath.
And then this other wound right here, the superficial incised wound right here on the left side. Defense also chatted with you about that wound. And once again, you mentioned that wound was a scratch. Is it a scratch because it's not deep?
Yes, and I think it's kind of more relatable. If I say superficial incised wound, maybe not everybody knows what that means, but if I say scratch, well, most people know, okay, that's just, pretty superficial.
So that wound was not caused by like a fingernail, right?
No,
So that wound, once again, was caused by a sharp object
yes,
consistent with a knife.
something with a sharp edge.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Doctor, you may step down. State your next witness.
Your Honor, this time the state calls Amy Jones to the stand.